Hey, loser! Matthew's voice boomed through the small living room, jolting Jordan from his quiet evening routine. The last person Jordan expected in his home was Matthew Stanton, Chloe's boss, his wife's arrogant, overbearing manager. And yet here he was, swaggering in like he owned the place, throwing his jacket on the sofa, not even acknowledging Jordan's presence. Jordan sat frozen, processing Matthew's words. The man had come into his home unannounced and called him a loser. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Matthew sneered, staring Jordan down. "Hey, loser, I'm taking your wife on a wild night out and will satisfy her until morning. You can't say no. She's been working hard and deserves a reward, one that you can't provide. And let's face it, I'm doing her a favor." Jordan felt a sharp, cold sensation creep up his spine. Before he could respond, he heard heels clicking against the floor upstairs. He turned, watching Chloe emerge at the top of the staircase, her red dress clinging to her frame, her lipstick a shade of deep crimson that seemed designed to draw attention. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, as her eyes met Matthew's, she let a slight smile slip, almost as if sharing a private joke. "Hey, babe," Matthew called up to her, his voice warm and eager. "Ready for a real wild night out?" Jordan's throat tightened as Chloe looked over at him, the man she had shared her life with for nearly a decade, and gave a dismissive little shrug. "He's right, Jordan," she said, adjusting a strand of hair. Her tone was cold, almost mocking. "He's right. I love his 12-inch Dart Johnson inside me so much. Today's going to be so much fun. I'm leaving, honey. Don't wait for me and dinner. I'll be back whenever we're done." Jordan's stomach churned. He opened his mouth to say something, to demand an explanation, but his voice caught in his throat. How could she say this here in their home, without a hint of guilt or remorse? "Chloe, what's going on?" He finally managed to stammer, his fists clenched. "After all these years, you're just walking out with him? Like it's nothing?" Chloe looked at him with a mixture of pity and impatience, as if he was a child who just didn't understand. "It's more complicated than that, Jordan. Matthew appreciates me. He gives me things that you can't. Matthew knows how to make me feel alive. He's taking me out because he knows what I need, things you just wouldn't understand." Jordan's jaw tightened, his face paling as he processed her words. I thought I was enough." Matthew laughed, a grating sound that made Jordan's blood boil. "Enough? Look at yourself. She's been waiting for you to step up, but you're just too comfortable in this little life. Chloe deserves excitement, something you're clearly not up for." He turned to Chloe, offering his hand. "Ready to go?" Chloe walked down the last few steps, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, her gaze unwavering. She took Matthew's hand without a hint of hesitation, her back straight, her expression proud. "You know," Jordan said, his voice barely more than a whisper, "I trusted you. We built a life together. I gave you everything I had." Chloe barely looked back, her hand already slipping into Matthew's. "Sometimes, Jordan, everything just isn't enough." She adjusted her hair one last time, offering Jordan a fleeting glance that held nothing of the warmth he once knew. "Don't wait up. Dinner's in the fridge." As she and Matthew moved toward the door, Jordan found himself rooted to the spot, anger, pain, and disbelief swirling within him. The air felt thick, suffocating. He wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but all he could do was watch as Matthew turned back one last time with a smirk. "Maybe get used to nights alone, Jordan. It's just reality," he sneered. "Your wife deserves a real man, and I think we both know who that is." With that, the door clicked shut, leaving Jordan alone in a silence that felt far too loud. For a long moment, he stood there, the echo of Matthew's mocking laughter ringing in his ears. He closed his eyes, replaying Chloe's dismissive look, her words dripping with disdain. The weight of betrayal settled over him, cold and heavy. He sank down onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands, trying to come to terms with the reality of what had just happened. The woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, had walked out without a second glance, choosing a life of excitement over the steady love he'd built for them. Finally, he lifted his head, his expression hardening as resolve set in. This wasn't the end, not for him. His whole world had crumbled in a single evening, But that didn't mean he would stay broken. Jordan clenched his jaw, his eyes narrowing with a fierce determination. "Chloe, you think this is over," he murmured to the empty room. "But you have no idea what's coming." He sat there for a while longer, gathering his thoughts, imagining every cruel thing Matthew had said and every cold look Chloe had given him. If this was how they wanted things, he would oblige. He stood, shoulders back, a new strength coursing through him. This wasn't defeat, it was only the beginning. Jordan felt a suffocating silence settle over the house. He sat motionless, staring at the spot where they had stood. Their mocking words echoed in his mind, twisting the knife of betrayal deeper. Jordan replayed every moment, the smug expression on Matthew's face, the look of utter disdain in Chloe's eyes, and the absolute arrogance in their voices. "She deserves a taste of her own poison," he muttered, the words slipping out in a low, steady whisper. He took a deep breath, feeling the humiliation and betrayal burn into something sharper, harder. He wouldn't let this go unanswered. Hours slipped by as he sat alone, thinking. His mind went to every time he'd supported Chloe, every time he'd chosen her over himself, all the things he'd sacrificed for their life together. But tonight, with her betrayal fresh and raw, he realized that he hadn't just been betrayed, he'd been disrespected, cast aside without a second thought. The next morning, Jordan started his day with a sense of determination. Chloe thought she could walk all over him. She would learn that she had gravely underestimated him. Revenge would not be an angry outburst. It would be calculated, planned, something that would make them regret the moment they laughed in his face. The first step was understanding their patterns. He knew Chloe well enough to know where she would be, the places she loved, and her routines. But Matthew was another story. Jordan needed to dig deeper, to find what Matthew valued most and where his vulnerabilities lay. Jordan's first stop was a local cafe where Chloe often spent her mornings before work. He arrived early, sitting near the window where he had a clear view of the entrance. As expected, Chloe walked in, her eyes scanning the room casually. She wore a dress he hadn't seen before, a gift from Matthew, Jordan realized, feeling a fresh wave of resentment. He watched her sit down and pull out her phone, her face lighting up at a message. His fists tightened as he imagined it was from Matthew. His anger didn't cloud his judgment, though. He remained patient, making a mental note of every detail. Her routine, her favorite spots, even the order she placed with the barista. This was information he would use, small pieces of a bigger picture. By the second day, Jordan's plans became more defined. He knew that Matthew ran his own company and that he wasn't exactly known for honest practices. If Matthew had any weaknesses, it would be there, in the darker corners of his business. Jordan would expose every flaw, every shady deal Matthew had made. Jordan began spending his nights researching, following leads online, and making a few calls to people who might know Matthew. He reached out to an old friend who worked in finance, asking about Matthew's company and hinting that he was considering a business deal. His friend's response was telling, "Stay away from that guy. Shady as they come. He's been investigated more than once for tax evasion, but somehow he always weasels out of it." That was all Jordan needed to hear. He spent hours poring through public records, online news articles, and industry forums. Slowly, he began piecing together a timeline of Matthew's questionable practices. There were rumors of fraud, misappropriated funds, and bribes to regulatory officials. "Matthew, you've been a busy man," Jordan muttered, a small smile playing on his lips. He knew he'd struck gold. The following morning, Jordan followed Matthew to his office, a sleek glass building in the city's financial district. Jordan parked across the street and waited, watching the man he despised swagger out of his car and greet his employees with that same arrogant smirk. As Matthew entered the building, Jordan felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to find a way into Matthew's fortress. That evening, Jordan made another call, this time to an old college buddy who had taken a job in cybersecurity. "Matt, I need a favor," he said, keeping his tone casual. "It's complicated, but let's just say it involves a guy who has it coming." Matt laughed on the other end of the line. "Sounds interesting. What are we talking about here?" "I need to get access to some files. Nothing you can trace back to me, but it needs to be discreet. Can you help me out? Matt hesitated but eventually agreed. All right, send me what you've got, and I'll see what I can do. Just be careful. That night, Jordan sent over everything he had gathered so far: business accounts, employee lists, even a rumor about a hidden offshore account. With Matt's help, he knew he could get the evidence he needed to dismantle Matthew's empire. A week later, Jordan had what he needed. Matt came through, providing Jordan with files that contained incriminating information on Matthew, fraudulent transactions, fake invoices, and, most importantly, proof of a slush fund used to bribe officials. It was enough to ruin Matthew's business, destroy his reputation, and even land him in prison if handled correctly. Now, all that was left was timing. Jordan spent the week preparing for what would be his final act in the twisted drama Chloe and Matthew had unwittingly cast him into. Each night, he pored over the evidence he'd gathered: financial reports, hidden accounts, emails that tied Matthew to a laundry list of crimes. The more he uncovered, the more he realized how deep Matthew's corruption ran. It was bigger than he'd expected, and each discovery only strengthened his resolve. He needed the perfect opportunity to reveal the truth, a public unraveling, with no chance for them to wriggle out. The idea came to him one night as he lay in bed, mentally replaying his conversations with Chloe. She would never see it coming. Her pride had blinded her to the man she'd left behind. As for Matthew, his ego would compel him to accept. And so, he crafted his invitation, an olive branch in appearance, but the trigger for his vengeance in reality. The evening of the dinner arrived. Jordan dressed carefully, choosing a navy suit that exuded confidence, yet kept his expression calm and friendly. He checked the dining table, ensuring that the wine glasses were perfectly aligned and the dishes arranged neatly. Everything was set to disarm them, to lull them into a false sense of security. A knock on the door broke the silence. Taking a steadying breath, Jordan opened it to find Matthew and Chloe standing there. Matthew, dressed in a sleek blazer, wore a self-satisfied smirk, his arm casually draped over Chloe's shoulders. Chloe, dressed in a fitted black dress, looked around the house with an expression that was part curiosity, part suspicion. "Jordan," she said, her tone almost uncertain. "Thanks for inviting us." Jordan gave them a warm smile, gesturing them inside. "Please come in. Tonight is about leaving things in the past, right?" Matthew gave a mocking chuckle as he stepped in, his eyes sweeping over Jordan's carefully laid dinner table. "About time you saw the light, Jordan. Not everyone's made to handle a woman like Chloe." He placed his hand possessively on her shoulder. "But you seem like you've finally accepted reality." Jordan nodded, seemingly unfazed. "Believe me, Matthew, I've come to terms with a lot lately." Chloe glanced around, still cautious, but Jordan's welcoming demeanor softened her suspicion. "It's nice, Jordan. You didn't have to go through all this trouble." Jordan just shrugged, pouring wine into their glasses as they settled into their seats. "It's no trouble at all. I want this evening to be one we all remember." They sat down, and Jordan raised his glass, giving Matthew a polite smile. "To new beginnings." Matthew clinked his glass against Jordan's with a smug grin, clearly pleased with himself. "New beginnings. Cheers to that." The initial conversation flowed casually, Jordan steering the topics toward light matters, allowing Matthew to boast about his career and Chloe to share superficial updates. Jordan feigned interest, leaning forward with polite nods and adding just enough affirmations to keep them talking. All the while, he kept his true intentions buried, biding his time. The evening had started smoothly, with Jordan playing the perfect host. The laughter and casual conversation made it seem like any other dinner party, with no indication of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Matthew, ever the confident guest, leaned back with his glass of wine, telling stories about his latest business deals, while Chloe forced a smile, trying to keep her unease hidden. "Remember that trip to the mountains a few years back, Chloe?" Jordan asked, with a nostalgic smile. "The one where we almost got lost? We ended up finding that little cabin and had hot chocolate by the fire." Chloe nodded, her eyes shifting uncomfortably. "Yes, I remember." Jordan poured another glass for her, his face thoughtful. "It's funny how things change, isn't it? One moment, you think you know someone. The next, they're a stranger." Matthew glanced at Chloe, smirking. Some people just need a little more excitement in life, Jordan. Maybe that's where you missed the mark, huh? Jordan chuckled, though his eyes held a different intensity. Maybe, Matthew. But sometimes excitement comes with consequences. As the main course wrapped up, Jordan set his fork down, and his tone shifted. You know, Matthew, it's funny you talk about excitement in life. I stumbled on something recently that seemed exciting. As the meal wore on, Jordan finally leaned back, his gaze falling on Matthew. You know, I've actually been doing a lot of thinking about life, choices, things that matter. He paused, letting the words sink in, then added casually, I've even had some people looking at new business opportunities. Matthew looked at him, a little intrigued. Is that so? Jordan nodded. It's amazing what you can find out about people these days. You know, things people think are hidden. He took a measured sip of wine, watching the flicker of uncertainty flash across Matthew's face. Matthew's smirk wavered slightly, but he shrugged it off. Well, when you're at the top, people are always trying to dig up dirt. It comes with the territory. True enough, Jordan agreed, leaning back. It must be hard, keeping everything above board with the kind of money you're making. Chloe gave Matthew a nervous glance, but Matthew waved it off, smiling with forced nonchalance. Please, I've got nothing to hide. My business is solid. Oh, I'm sure it is, Jordan replied, his voice smooth. Though I did come across something peculiar in my own research. He pulled out a folder, placing it on the table, his fingers tapping it lightly. It's amazing what's accessible when you know the right people. Like offshore accounts, for instance. The room grew tense. Matthew's smile disappeared, and he leaned forward, his voice low. What are you getting at, Jordan? Jordan met his gaze, his expression finally hardening. I'm saying that I know exactly how you've been funding that lifestyle of yours. Shady investments, fraudulent accounts, offshore slush funds. And I've got all the evidence right here. He patted the folder. Chloe's face went pale as she looked from Jordan to Matthew, her eyes widening in realization. Matthew, what's he talking about? Matthew clenched his jaw, glaring at Jordan. This is pathetic. Are you really so bitter that you go this far? Jordan laughed softly. You humiliated me in my own home, flaunting your affair like a trophy. You called me a loser to my face. Did you think I'd just forget about that? Chloe reached for Matthew's arm, her voice pleading. Matthew, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you're not involved in anything illegal. Matthew shook her off, his face twisted in anger. This is a setup. Jordan's just bitter, trying to drag us down because he can't handle reality. Jordan leaned forward, his voice calm but cold. You know, well, it's about a company that's been running some off-the-books transactions, hiding funds overseas, covering up, shall we say, unsavory practices? Matthew's smirk faltered slightly. You're talking about business like you know something, Jordan? Oh, I know a lot, Matthew, Jordan replied. For example, I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans, the ones you use to siphon funds out of your company without raising red flags. I know about the shell companies, the fake invoices, and the bribes. Matthew's face paled. He shifted in his seat, struggling to keep his composure. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, casting a warning glance at Chloe, whose face had gone white. Oh, I know enough, Jordan said, reaching for a folder beside him. He slid it across the table toward Matthew. Go on, take a look. I've got everything right here, records, transactions, even a few cozy emails with your business associates. Matthew took the folder reluctantly, flipping through the pages. With each sheet, his expression darkened. Chloe looked at Jordan, her voice shaking. Jordan, please, we can talk about this. You don't need to do this, not like this. Jordan's gaze shifted to her, his face devoid of any warmth. Chloe, you tore apart our life together for a man you thought could give you everything. Did you ever stop to wonder what he was really giving you? Or did the thrill of it all blind you? Her eyes filled with regret. Jordan, I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, but we can still fix this. Jordan shook his head, his voice resolute. There's no fixing what's broken here, Chloe. Not after what you two did. Matthew, finally snapping out of his stunned silence, pushed the folder away with a sneer. So, what's your plan here, Jordan? Think you can scare me with some documents? Go ahead, take it to the authorities. See if they actually care. Jordan laughed softly, unbothered by Matthew's bravado. "Oh, I plan to. But that's not all I'm doing, Matthew. I've already taken measures to make sure your most valuable clients know what's been happening behind closed doors. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to know how you've been mismanaging their investments." Matthew's jaw clenched, his mask of arrogance slipping. You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I've already dared," Jordan replied, crossing his arms. "The emails have been sent. The documents have been shared. By tomorrow morning, you'll be facing an investigation from more than just the authorities." Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Jordan, please don't do this. You're angry, and I understand why, but there's no need to ruin everything." Jordan looked at her, his expression hardened by the hurt she'd caused. "Chloe, this was your choice. You chose him. You chose this life. And now, you'll have to live with the consequences of that choice." Matthew, realizing the weight of Jordan's words, turned to Chloe, his voice laced with desperation. "Did you know about this? About what he's done?" Chloe shook her head, her voice a whisper. "No, I didn't know." Jordan glanced between them, a small, humorless smile on his lips. "Ironic, isn't it? You built your little fantasy on lies, and now it's all crashing down. You wanted excitement, Matthew? Here it is." Matthew's face twisted in anger as he lunged forward, slamming his fist on the table. "You think you're so clever, don't you, Jordan? You think you've won? I'll fight this with every last cent I have. You'll regret coming after me." Jordan remained unfazed. "I've thought about every possible move, Matthew. I know how you operate. You can try to fight, but when the evidence is this strong, no amount of money will save you. The truth is a way of catching up, doesn't it?" Chloe reached for Matthew's arm, her voice frantic. "Matthew, what are we going to do? This could ruin everything." Matthew pulled away, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't worry, we'll figure this out. I'm not going down without a fight." Jordan gave them one last look, his voice low but steady. "Consider this my goodbye to both of you. You chose a path filled with lies and deceit. Now, you'll face the consequences together." He rose from the table, walking toward the door, gesturing for them to leave. They followed, Matthew muttering threats under his breath while Chloe remained silent, her face a mix of anger, guilt, and helplessness. As they reached the door, Jordan turned to them one last time. "Good luck, Matthew. You're going to need it." With that, he closed the door behind them, sealing their fate. He stood in the silence of his empty house, feeling a strange sense of liberation wash over him. The betrayal, the pain, it was all behind him now. For the first time in months, he felt free. Jordan's calculated plan had set off a domino effect, turning Matthew's life upside down. Within days of the revelations, the once arrogant CEO found himself under a fierce investigation. His accounts were frozen, and his name now echoed in headlines for fraud and embezzlement. Banks, once friendly to him, were cutting ties, and his so-called loyal clients vanished at the hint of scandal. The carefully built empire he'd boasted about was now crumbling around him, and there was no one left to answer his desperate calls. As the weight of the investigation bore down, Matthew's demeanor shifted from confidence to desperation. He lashed out at everyone close to him, including Chloe, who found herself bearing the brunt of his anger. Each day, his calls grew more volatile, his tone more accusing. "This is your fault," he yelled one night, pacing the lavish penthouse suite that now felt more like a prison. "I've lost everything. All of it gone." Chloe, who had once reveled in the luxury and excitement Matthew provided, shrank under his harsh glare. "Matthew, I didn't ask for this. You said everything was under control. You said no one could touch you." He sneered, his face twisted with contempt. "And you bought it all, didn't you? Like a fool. You and your precious reward for abandoning your husband." He laughed bitterly, his voice thick with resentment. "Congratulations, Chloe. We're both ruined." The words stung, but Chloe had nowhere to go. Her attempt to start fresh with Matthew had left her isolated from the life she'd known, her family, her friends, and now, her respect. Unable to hold back her own panic, she grabbed her coat, mumbling something about needing air, and walked out. The following evening, as the desperation mounted, Chloe found herself standing at Jordan's doorstep, her heart pounding. She'd been here a dozen times before, once as his wife, and now as a woman barely holding on to the last shreds of dignity. She knew she had no right to come back, not after the way she'd left. But she was out of options, and every part of her was screaming for some kind of solace. She took a deep breath and knocked. When the door opened, Jordan's face appeared, calm and collected. His expression gave nothing away, but she could see a guardedness in his eyes. He looked down at her, waiting for her to speak, his silence stretching. "Jordan," she choked, struggling to find the words. "Please, I need to talk to you." He crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe. "Talk then." She stepped forward, her face crumpling as she finally let her tears fall. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I threw everything away. But I made a terrible mistake, Jordan. I was blinded by everything Matthew promised. I thought it was what I wanted, but it was all lies." He listened quietly, his gaze unwavering. "What exactly did you think you'd find, Chloe?" Chloe took a deep, shuddering breath, her voice breaking. "I was wrong, Jordan. So wrong. And now everything's falling apart. He's lost everything, and he's turning on me. I can't live like this." She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his arm. "Please, Jordan, give me another chance. I can't do this without you." Jordan looked down at her hand on his arm, then slowly moved it away, his tone steady. "You threw us away, Chloe. You thought Matthew could give you more, so you didn't think twice about breaking our vows, our life." Her tears fell faster, her voice pleading. "I was stupid, Jordan. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I miss you, and I miss us. Can't we try to fix this?" He shook his head, letting out a quiet sigh. "It's too late for that. I've spent months picking up the pieces you left behind, rebuilding a life for myself that doesn't include you. You have no idea what I went through." He paused, his voice thickening for the first time. "You weren't just my wife, Chloe. You were my best friend, and you broke that without a second thought." Chloe's face crumpled, and she dropped her gaze, unable to look him in the eye. I thought you'd be fine. I thought you'd get over it." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Get over it? You broke my trust, Chloe. I don't know if you understand what that means. I trusted you with my life, and you threw it all away. Now you expect me to forget it, to pretend none of it happened?" She bit her lip, nodding. "I know it's too much to ask, but if we could just try." "No, Chloe." He cut her off, his tone firm. "Trying would only hurt us both. I'm no longer the man you thought you could leave behind. I've found peace on my own, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that again." Her shoulders shook as she clung to the last strands of hope. "Please, Jordan, I can't go back to him. He's turning on me, blaming me for everything. I need you." Jordan watched her for a moment, a mixture of pity and anger flickering across his face. "You chose Matthew over me, Chloe. You can go back to whatever's left of that choice." Desperate, she reached for his arm again, her voice breaking. "Jordan, please don't do this. You don't understand how miserable I am. I can't sleep. I can't think. I'm drowning in all of this." He took her hand off his arm, holding it briefly before letting it go. "You don't understand, Chloe. I gave you everything I had, and it still wasn't enough. I've moved on. You need to do the same." Chloe's face was pale, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, that's it? You're really done with me?" He gave her a long look, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You made your decision, Chloe. Now live with it." Her lip quivered as she looked at him one last time, realizing just how final his words were. She backed away, her hands shaking, and turned toward the door, the weight of her actions settling heavily on her shoulders. The life she had traded for fleeting thrills was truly gone, and the man she had loved was lost to her forever. As she stepped outside, the cold night air hit her, a sob escaping her lips as she realized the depth of her loss. She'd walked away from everything good, and there was no going back. Inside, Jordan closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a long breath. He stood there for a moment, taking in the silence of his home. There was a strange peace in the finality of her leaving, as though he'd closed a painful chapter of his life. As he moved through the house, he noticed the framed pictures still standing in the hallway, remnants of his life with Chloe. He picked up one of them, staring at their faces smiling back at him, frozen in a moment of happiness. After a moment's hesitation, he set the photo face down on the table, then moved to the window, watching as Chloe's figure disappeared down the street. For the first time in a long time, he felt truly free. He'd weathered the storm, endured the heartbreak, and reclaimed his life. The morning sunlight filtered through Jordan's new apartment, casting a gentle glow across the room. He took a sip of his coffee, feeling a quiet satisfaction with where he was. The past few months had transformed him, slowly but powerfully, and for the first time, he was in complete control of his life. Jordan's days were no longer marked by the tension and resentment that had clouded his marriage. Instead, he filled his time with simple joys, trying new recipes, joining a local running group, even picking up a sketchbook again, a hobby he'd left behind years ago. He'd reconnected with old friends, strengthening bonds that had faded in the last few years of his relationship with Chloe. One evening, at a local art gallery opening, he met someone unexpected. Her name was Grace, a down-to-earth photographer with an infectious laugh and a warm, inviting presence. They'd bumped into each other by chance, both reaching for the same piece of art on display. "Oh, sorry about that," Grace chuckled, looking at Jordan with a hint of amusement. "Didn't mean to steal your spot." "No worries," Jordan replied, a smile crossing his face as he looked at her. "Guess we just have good taste." They struck up a conversation that flowed as naturally as breathing. She was passionate, curious, and genuinely interested in hearing about his life, his real life. As they shared stories over a couple of drinks, Jordan felt a kind of ease that had been missing for so long. It wasn't about escaping anything. It was about finding someone who genuinely appreciated him, flaws and all. Days turned into weeks, and he and Grace continued seeing each other, finding solace and laughter in each other's company. There was no rush to prove anything, no pressure to meet unspoken expectations. For the first time, Jordan felt like he could be himself, and that was enough. While Jordan's life blossomed, Chloe's world had become an unending struggle. The luxury she'd taken for granted was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar desperation. After Matthew's legal troubles became public, he'd gone into hiding, leaving her to deal with the fallout. The penthouse, her designer clothes, the extravagant lifestyle, it had all been repossessed, seized by authorities, or auctioned off to pay his debts. The first time she found herself looking for work, she was filled with a mix of fear and disbelief. She hadn't held a job in years, relying instead on the comfort and wealth that had been given to her. Now those doors were closed. She'd sent dozens of applications and attended interview after interview, only to be met with polite rejections and cold stares. Her past association with Matthew had become common knowledge, and few companies wanted to risk the scandal. One night, exhausted and frustrated, Chloe found herself standing outside Jordan's building again. She hadn't seen him since their last encounter, but part of her hoped he might at least give her a moment's kindness. She hadn't realized how deeply she'd hurt him until she saw the new strength in his eyes during that last conversation. The Jordan she remembered had been kind, forgiving. She'd counted on that version of him. Jordan, arriving home from dinner with Grace, spotted Chloe lingering by the entryway. She looked worn, her eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd lost everything. He stopped, meeting her gaze with a mixture of empathy and distance. "Jordan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but could we talk?" He studied her, not with anger, but with the detached understanding of someone who had moved on. "Chloe, there's nothing left to talk about. We've been over this." Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a step forward. "Please, Jordan, I don't have anyone else. I don't even know how I got here." He sighed, a part of him still sympathetic but resolute. "Chloe, I tried to show you that a long time ago. You chose a different life, one I couldn't give you. Now, that's all gone. You've made your choices." She nodded, brushing away a tear. I know. I was stupid. I was selfish. And now I have nothing left." Her voice cracked as she looked up at him, the person she once dismissed now representing a kind of stability she'd never valued. "Can we just talk? Even for a few minutes?" He paused, considering her for a long moment. The old Jordan might have given in, let her inside for another round of questions and regrets. But that person was gone. Instead, he spoke with a gentleness that was also firm. "Chloe, I have someone in my life now. Someone who values me for who I am, without any of the games or conditions. You can't expect me to walk back into your world after everything that's happened. Her face fell as she realized what he was saying. I understand. She backed away, finally accepting that there was no undoing the path she'd taken. I'm sorry, Jordan. I'm truly sorry. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the quiet night. He watched her go, feeling a wave of closure he hadn't anticipated. The weight of the past had finally lifted, and he was free to move forward. In the following weeks, Jordan found himself fully immersed in a new chapter of his life, one marked by genuine joy and connection. Grace brought lightness and depth, and together, they built a relationship founded on mutual respect and trust. They traveled, shared late-night conversations, and took on new challenges together, each step further reinforcing Jordan's belief that he was exactly where he needed to be. One evening, after a quiet dinner in their favorite little bistro, Grace took Jordan's hand. I know you've been through a lot, Jordan, she said softly, but I want you to know that I see you, the real you, and I'm grateful to be a part of this journey with you. He squeezed her hand, smiling. Thank you, Grace, for everything. I feel like I've finally found the life I was meant to have. Their bond grew, and with every passing day, Jordan let go of the bitterness that had once clouded his heart. He realized that while betrayal had shattered his old life, it had also led him to a deeper understanding of himself and what he truly wanted. Chloe, meanwhile, faced her new reality. Her life had turned into a cycle of odd jobs, minimum wage pay, and sleepless nights wondering where it had all gone wrong. Each day was a reminder of what she'd lost, a shadow of the life she'd once thrown away so carelessly. Her choices had left her with nothing but regret, a lesson that came at an irreversible cost. For Jordan, however, this new chapter held only possibility. He'd emerged from the turmoil with a renewed sense of purpose and a partner who cherished him for exactly who he was. And in this newfound happiness, he finally understood that sometimes the hardest endings were the ones that made way for the most meaningful beginnings. Years had slipped by, each season a stark reminder to Chloe of everything she'd lost and could never regain. She'd settled into a monotonous job, working as a cashier at a small grocery store on the edge of town. It was a far cry from the life she once flaunted. No more luxury, no more comfort, just an endless repetition of small transactions and fleeting smiles. On most days, she tried to keep her head down, focusing on the tasks at hand, avoiding eye contact as much as possible. But every now and then, someone from her old life would pass through her line, their looks filled with shock or pity. Each encounter gnawed at her pride, deepening the regret that never quite left her. One evening, as she shuffled home through a light drizzle, Chloe's thoughts drifted back to the night she'd left Jordan standing at the door with Matthew. Her choices echoed in her mind like a haunting refrain. She remembered Jordan's expression, hurt, disbelief, and then something colder, something she hadn't understood then. She hadn't expected that Jordan, quiet and forgiving, would ever turn his back on her so completely. The memory of his last words echoed, his voice filled with calm finality. You threw us away, Chloe. There's no coming back. In those days, she'd thought her decisions were opening doors to a better life, one that Jordan could never provide. Matthew had promised her the world, but all he'd delivered was betrayal and destruction. When he finally abandoned her, hiding from authorities and debts, Chloe was left holding the weight of her decisions, and that weight only grew heavier with time. Meanwhile, Jordan's life had taken a path he could have never foreseen. His quiet apartment was now filled with the laughter and warmth of a new family, Grace and their young daughter, Lily. It had taken him a long time to trust again, but with Grace, things had just fallen into place. They'd started with friendship, sharing countless late-night conversations and morning hikes, and eventually, love found its way in. One crisp autumn morning, Jordan, Grace, and Lily took a walk through the park near their home, the trees aflame with orange and yellow leaves. As they strolled, Lily's small hand gripped his finger tightly as she pointed out every squirrel and bird in sight. Jordan felt a happiness that wasn't wrapped in fantasy or dreams, but in the everyday moments he now cherished deeply. Grace turned to him, watching as he swung Lily up into his arms, both laughing as her curls bounced with every step. "She adores you, you know?" Grace said, her eyes soft. "We're so lucky to have you." Jordan met her gaze, warmth spreading through him. "I think I'm a lucky one. I never thought I'd get here. Not after everything." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Thank you for letting me be. Just me." She reached over, taking his hand. "You've always been enough, Jordan." The simplicity of her words held a power he'd never felt in his former life. Grace saw him fully, without expectation or condition. He no longer needed to prove anything or fight for the approval he'd once sought so desperately. One rainy afternoon, a familiar face entered Chloe's grocery store. She froze when she recognized who it was. It was Sarah, an old friend from her past life, a friend she hadn't seen since her days with Matthew. Sarah hesitated, then offered a polite smile, setting her basket on the counter. They exchanged pleasantries, the awkwardness thickening the air around them. "Chloe," Sarah finally said, lowering her voice, "I didn't expect to see you here." Chloe gave a weak nod, focusing on scanning the items in silence. "Yeah, well, things didn't turn out quite as planned," she mumbled, her voice barely audible over the beep of the scanner. Sarah nodded sympathetically, her expression somewhere between pity and discomfort. "Last I heard, you and Matthew—" "Well, it seems like you've been through a lot." Chloe forced a smile, the bitterness creeping into her tone. "A lot is one way to put it." She paused, as if debating whether to share more, but quickly dismissed the thought. This was her reality now, and the fewer people she dragged into it, the better. As Sarah left with a quiet farewell, Chloe felt a surge of anger mixed with sadness. Her former friends saw her as a shadow of her past self, a cautionary tale whispered about at gatherings she'd never be invited to again. And she knew they were right. She'd chosen this path, and now there was no going back. A few weeks later, Chloe was heading home when she noticed a family across the street, two parents and a young girl playing tag, their laughter echoing in the twilight. The man looked familiar, and as she got closer, recognition struck her. It was Jordan, his face lit with joy as he chased after the little girl, Grace's laughter joining in. Chloe stopped, her heart pounding. She watched as he swung the girl up, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead, the scene both beautiful and painful. She felt a pang of envy and regret twisting inside her, sharp and unrelenting. In that single moment, she understood the full weight of what she had lost. Jordan looked up, catching her eye from across the street. There was no malice in his gaze, no trace of the bitterness she had expected. He simply looked at her with quiet recognition, as if she were a stranger who had once passed through his life. He nodded politely, then turned back to his family, leaving her standing in the cold. Chloe walked away slowly, the scene replaying in her mind. There was no anger, no opportunity for apologies or explanations. Jordan had moved on completely, in a way she'd never anticipated. She was left alone, bearing the full weight of her decisions, the price of betrayal becoming painfully clear. In his new life, Jordan had found not only love, but peace, a kind of contentment he never thought possible. His experiences had taught him resilience and strength, transforming him into a man who could now recognize the value of trust, loyalty, and true connection. He cherished his days with Grace and Lily, knowing they were built on something real, unshakable. And as the years continued to pass, Chloe remained a distant memory, a chapter closed with finality. To Jordan, she was a reminder of the mistakes he'd endured, the pain he'd overcome, and the resilience that had carried him forward. The hardships had not only shaped him, but given him a second chance to live a life built on honesty, love, and respect. Chloe's life, however, was a daily reminder of the price of betrayal. She was haunted by the choices she could never undo, each regret a weight that grew heavier with time. She had been given everything and lost it all, reduced to a memory in the life of the man she once thought she could control. For Jordan, the journey had led him to a place of fulfillment and joy, where his past no longer cast a shadow over his future. He had discovered that even in the wake of betrayal, life could offer second chances, if you had the strength to embrace them. And so, Jordan continued forward, leaving the pain of his past behind him, knowing he'd finally found the life he deserved.